My family boycotted my wedding, then had the audacity to demand photos afterward. For memory, my mother said with that fake, sweet smile I knew too well. They thought they could pick and choose when to be part of my life, but those same photos they so desperately wanted are now sitting on a judge's desk as evidence against them. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I should have seen it coming when my mother, Patricia, hung up on me the moment I told her about David's job. But I was naive enough to think family meant something, that blood was thicker than their petty prejudices. I was wrong. Growing up in Westchester County, my family had always been obsessed with appearances. My father, Michael, owned a successful accounting firm, my mother, Patricia, was president of the country club's social committee, and my older brother, Marcus, worked in investment banking on Wall Street. Everything was about status, about what the neighbors would think, about maintaining our family's reputation in our affluent community. I had fallen in line for years. I went to the right schools, dated the right boys from the right families, and even started working at a prestigious law firm in Manhattan after graduation. But somewhere along the way, I realized I was living their life, not mine. When I met David Torres at a community volunteer event in Brooklyn, everything changed. David wasn't what my family would consider acceptable. He was a public school teacher in the Bronx, passionate about education reform and helping underprivileged kids. His father was a mechanic, his mother worked double shifts as a nurse. They lived in a modest house in Queens, drove used cars, and measured success by how many kids David helped graduate each year, not by how much money was in their bank accounts. But David made me laugh in ways I hadn't in years. He challenged me to think beyond my privileged bubble. He showed me what it meant to work for something meaningful rather than just profitable. When he proposed to me in Central Park on a snowy December evening, I said yes without hesitation. That's when the trouble started. I called my parents the next morning, practically bursting with excitement. My mother answered on the second ring, and I launched into the news before she could even say hello properly. "Mom, I have the most amazing news. David proposed last night, and—" "David who?" she interrupted, her voice already cooling. "David Torres, Mom. You know, my boyfriend. I've been with him for 2 years." Silence. Then, "The teacher?" The way she said it, like it was something distasteful she'd stepped in, should have been my first warning. But I pressed on, determined to share my joy. "Yes, and he's wonderful, Mom. The wedding will be in June, and I was hoping we could start planning." Click. She hung up. I stared at my phone, confused. Maybe the call had dropped. I tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried my father's phone. Same thing. Marcus didn't even pick up. 3 days passed before my mother finally returned my calls. Her voice was cold, controlled, the tone she used when she was about to deliver bad news to someone beneath her social standing. "Jennifer, your father and I have discussed this extensively. We cannot and will not support this union." "What are you talking about? You barely know David." "We know enough. He's not suitable for our family. His background, his profession, his people. It's simply not acceptable." I felt something crack inside my chest. "His people? Mom, what are you even saying?" "You know exactly what I'm saying. We've spent years building our reputation in this community. We cannot have you throwing it all away for some public school teacher from Queens. He has a master's degree from Columbia. He's dedicated his life to helping children learn and grow. How is that throwing anything away?" Don't be naive, Jennifer. Marriage isn't just about feelings. It's about building a life, maintaining standards, ensuring your children have the opportunities they deserve. What kind of life can he give you? What kind of future? I said quietly. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Happiness doesn't pay for private schools or country club memberships, or the kind of wedding that befits someone from our family. Then maybe I don't want that kind of wedding. Another silence, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was ice. If you go through with this, Jennifer, don't expect us to be there. Any of us. We will not participate in this mistake, and we certainly won't pretend to celebrate it. You're not serious? I am completely serious. Choose carefully, Jennifer. Him or us. You cannot have both. The line went dead again, and this time I knew it wasn't an accident. I spent the next week in a daze, hoping they'd come around, hoping cooler heads would prevail. David tried to comfort me, suggested maybe we should meet with my parents, try to bridge the gap somehow. He was willing to do whatever it took to make peace with my family because he knew how much they meant to me. But my family had made their position crystal clear. Marcus called me once, briefly, to tell me I was being selfish and embarrassing the family name. Just find someone appropriate, he said. There are plenty of suitable men in our circle. I don't want someone from our circle, I told him. I want David. Then you're an idiot, he replied, and hung up. My mother tried a different approach. She started sending me articles about successful marriages, profiles of couples from prominent families, not so subtle hints about the law firm partners who were still single. She left voicemails about charity galas and social events I should attend, places where she might meet the right kind of person. When none of that worked, she tried guilt. Long emails about how disappointed she was, how I was throwing away everything they'd given her, how selfish I was being. She talked about family legacy and responsibility, about the sacrifices she and my father had made to give me opportunities. But she never once asked if I was happy, never once asked about David as a person rather than as a profession or a social class. Never once considered that maybe, just maybe, I had found something real and valuable that couldn't be measured in dollars or social standing. The final straw came when I sent out wedding invitations. I included my parents, Marcus, my aunts and uncles, my cousins. Part of me still hoped they'd see the elegant invitations, the beautiful venue David and I had chosen in Westchester, and realize I wasn't throwing my life away. I was building something beautiful. Instead, I got a manila envelope in the mail 3 days later. No return address, but I recognized my mother's handwriting. Inside were all the invitations I'd sent to family members. Every single one. Torn in half. At the bottom of the envelope was a note in my mother's pristine handwriting. Since you've chosen to exclude your real family from your life, we're returning the favor. Don't expect us to participate in this spectacle. I sat on my kitchen floor holding those torn pieces of cardstock and cried for an hour. David found me there when he came home from school, surrounded by the remnants of my last attempt at reconciliation. "Maybe we should just elope," he said gently, helping me up. "We don't need their approval to be happy." But I was done running from confrontation, done letting my family's prejudices dictate my choices. "No," I said, wiping my eyes. "We're having our wedding exactly as we planned. If they want to miss it because they're too stubborn and small-minded to see what an incredible man you are, that's their loss." I thought that was the end of it. I thought they'd made their choice, and I'd mine, and we'd all live with the consequences. The wedding was beautiful anyway. David's family embraced me completely, and our friends filled the spaces where my blood relatives should have been. But my family wasn't done with me yet. They just needed something from me first. The silence that followed our wedding was deafening. Not a single congratulations card, no phone calls, no acknowledgement that one of the most important days of my life had even happened. It was as if I had simply ceased to exist in their world the moment I walked down that aisle. David and I settled into married life in our cozy apartment in Park Slope. He continued teaching at his school in the Bronx, coming home every evening with stories about his students' progress and challenges. I threw myself into my work at the law firm, determined to prove that I could build a successful career without my family's connections or approval. But the complete radio silence from Westchester was harder than I'd expected. I'd grown up in a family that, despite their flaws, had always been present. Sunday dinners, holiday gatherings, phone calls about trivial daily events. The sudden absence of all that was like losing a limb I hadn't realized I'd been relying on. 3 months after our wedding, I ran into my mother's friend Eleanor Whitman at Whole Foods in Manhattan. I was picking up groceries after work when I heard that familiar voice behind me. Jennifer? Jennifer Morrison? A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. I turned around and there was Eleanor, looking exactly as polished as always in her Chanel suit and perfectly styled blonde hair. She'd been my mother's closest friend for over 20 years, a fixture at every family gathering I could remember. "It's Jennifer Torres now," I said, forcing a smile. Eleanor's expression flickered, just for a moment, before she recovered. "Of course, how lovely. Your mother mentioned you'd gotten married." Mentioned, like it was a casual footnote rather than a life-changing event? She did? I couldn't hide the surprise in my voice. My mother had acknowledged my wedding existed? Oh yes, she's been keeping everyone updated. Eleanor's smile was tight, practiced. Such a unique choice of venue, very rustic. The venue had been a restored barn in Westchester, elegant and romantic with string lights and flowing curtains, hardly rustic, but I knew what she was really saying. "It was beautiful," I said simply. "I'm sure it was, dear. And your husband, he's a teacher, correct?" "Yes, high school English. He's incredible with his students." Eleanor nodded, the way people nod when they're humoring a child who's insisting their imaginary friend is real. How fulfilling for him. "And you're still at Hartwell and Associates?" "I am. I made a junior partner last month, actually." This seemed to surprise her. "Well, that's wonderful. I'm sure your parents are proud." I doubted my parents even knew about my promotion, but I just smiled and said nothing. "You know," Eleanor continued, leaning in conspiratorially, "your mother has been having the most difficult time with Marcus lately. He's been dating this girl from the city, completely inappropriate. Nothing like the lovely girls from good families she's introduced him to. Patricia is beside herself." The irony wasn't lost on me. My brother, the golden boy, was apparently putting my mother through the same kind of stress I had, but somehow his dating choices were just a phase to be managed rather than a betrayal to be punished. "I hope it works out for him," I said diplomatically. Eleanor studied my face carefully. "You know, Jennifer, your mother misses you terribly. She just doesn't know how to bridge the gap. Pride is such a difficult thing." "She could start with a phone call," I said. "You know, Patricia, she's always believed that as a child, the first move should come from you. It's old-fashioned, I know, but that's her generation." I felt a flicker of hope, despite myself. Maybe there was a way back. Maybe the past 8 months of silence didn't have to be permanent. "Has she said that? What does she want me to call?" Eleanor's expression softened, becoming almost pitying. "Oh, sweetie, I think she's just waiting for you to come to your senses. When this phase passes, I'm sure she'll welcome you back with open arms." This phase, as if my marriage to David was some kind of rebellious experiment I'd eventually outgrow. "This isn't a phase, Eleanor. David is my husband. This is my life." Her smile became strained. "Of course, dear. I didn't mean to imply otherwise. I just meant, well, when you're ready to rejoin the family, I'm sure Patricia will be understanding." Rejoin the family, as if I had been the one to leave. I made my excuses and finished my shopping, but Eleanor's words stayed with me. The casual dismissal, the assumption that my marriage was temporary, the implication that I was the one who needed to make amends. It was exactly the kind of thinking that had led to the boycott in the first place. When I got home, I told David about the encounter. He listened quietly while he helped me unpack groceries, his jaw tightening slightly when I repeated Eleanor's comments. "So they're not ignoring us because they're angry," he said finally. "They're ignoring us because they think this will all blow over if they just wait long enough." "Apparently." David was quiet for a moment, putting away the last of the produce. "And what happens when it doesn't blow over? When we're still married in 5 years, 10 years?" I didn't have an answer for that. Part of me still hoped they'd come around eventually, that time would soften their prejudices. But a bigger part of me was starting to realize that my family's problem wasn't with the timing of my choices. It was with the choices themselves. The holidays came and went with no contact.
Christmas was particularly hard. David's family invited us to their celebration in Queens, and his mother, Elena, went out of her way to make me feel included. She gave me a beautiful necklace that had belonged to her mother, welcoming me officially into their family. But as wonderful as David's family was, I couldn't stop thinking about my own family's empty chairs around their dining room table. Were they thinking about me at all? Did Marcus ask where I was? Did my father wonder how I was doing? I got my answer in February when my cousin Rachel called out of the blue. Rachel was Marcus's age, and we'd grown up together, more like sisters than cousins. She was one of the few family members I genuinely missed. "Jennifer, thank God you answered," she said without preamble. "I've been wanting to call for months, but Aunt Patricia made everyone promise not to reach out to you." "She what?" "She said it would just encourage you to stay in this situation, that the family needed to present a united front until you came home." United front? Like I was an enemy to be defeated rather than a daughter who'd fallen in love? "Rachel, I am home. David and I are building a life together." I know, and I'm happy for you. I really am. I met David at your graduation party a few years ago, remember? He seemed really nice." "He is really nice. He's wonderful." "I'm sure he is. It's just, Jen, your mom is really struggling. She talks about you constantly, but then gets angry if anyone suggests maybe she should just call you. She's convinced that if she gives in now, she's somehow betraying everything she believes in about family standards and appropriate marriages." "What does that even mean, Rachel? David has never been anything but respectful to our family, even though they've treated him terribly." "I know it doesn't make sense, but you know how Aunt Patricia is about appearances. She's worried that if she accepts David, it sends a message to Marcus and me and everyone else that the family standards don't matter." "The family standards are ridiculous." Rachel sighed. "I agree with you, but she doesn't see it that way. She sees it as protecting the family legacy."
Protecting it from what? From happiness? From love? From what she sees as settling for less than we deserve? The conversation continued for another hour, with Rachel trying to play mediator and me trying to understand how my mother could be so stubborn. By the end, I realized that my family wasn't just waiting for me to come crawling back. They genuinely believed they were doing the right thing by freezing me out. In their minds, they were teaching me a valuable lesson about making appropriate choices. The problem was, the only lesson I was learning was how little my happiness mattered to them compared to their social standing. Spring arrived, and David got news that one of his former students had been accepted to Harvard with a full scholarship. The kid had come from a broken home, had been failing when David first met him, but David had worked with him after school, helped him find his love of literature, guided him through the college application process. We celebrated that night at a small restaurant in our neighborhood, and I watched David's face light up as he talked about the student's future, about the doors that were opening for him. This was what my family couldn't understand about David. His success couldn't be measured in salary or social status. It was measured in lives changed, in potential unlocked, in the difference he made every single day. But to my mother and father, none of that mattered because it didn't come with a corner office and a country club membership. I was starting to realize that the gap between my values and my family's was wider than I'd ever imagined. And they were so convinced they were right, so certain that I'd eventually see the error of my ways, that they had no idea what they were actually losing by pushing me away. They thought they were teaching me a lesson, but they were about to learn one themselves. A year and a half after our wedding, everything changed with a single phone call on a Tuesday evening in October. David was grading papers at our kitchen table while I reviewed case files for an upcoming trial when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer. "Is this Jennifer Torres?" The voice was professional, crisp. "Yes, this is Jennifer. This is Detective Sarah Chen with the Westchester County District Attorney's Office. I need to speak with you about your family's business dealings. Would it be possible to meet in person?" My blood went cold. What kind of business dealings? "I'd prefer to discuss this face-to-face. Are you available tomorrow afternoon?"
David looked up from his papers, seeing the concern on my face. I mouthed police to him and watched his eyebrows raise. Yes, I can meet tomorrow. Is my family in some kind of trouble? We're conducting an investigation into Morrison & Associates financial practices. Your name came up in our research as someone who might have relevant information. My father's accounting firm. I hadn't thought about the business in months, hadn't been involved with it since college when I'd done summer internships there. I haven't worked there in years. I'm not sure what information I could provide. You'd be surprised what details people remember. Can you meet me at the DA's office at 2 p.m. tomorrow? After I hung up, David set down his red pen and gave me his full attention. What was that about? I think my father's firm is being investigated for something financial. They want to talk to me tomorrow. Do you think it's serious? I thought about my father's business, tried to remember anything unusual from my time working there during summers. Michael Morrison had always run a tight ship, demanded perfection from his employees, prided himself on serving only the most exclusive clients in Westchester County. I don't know. Dad always seemed to do everything by the book. Maybe it's just routine. But even as I said it, something nagged at the back of my mind. Little things I'd noticed during those college summers, but had dismissed at the time. The next day, I sat across from Detective Chen in a sterile conference room, a thick file folder between us on the table. She was younger than I'd expected, probably early 30s, with intelligent dark eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Thank you for coming in, Mrs. Torres. I want to start by saying that you're not in any trouble. We're hoping you can help us understand some of the practices at Morrison during the time you worked there. That was just summer internships during college. I mostly did filing and basic data entry. Detective Chen opened the folder and pulled out several documents. These are tax returns and financial statements from some of your father's clients. Do any of these company names look familiar? I scanned the list. Whitmore Holdings, Sterling Investments, Pinnacle Properties. They all sounded familiar, though I couldn't place exactly why. I think I remember these from when I worked there, but I didn't handle their accounts directly. What about these? She showed me another set of documents. These are bank records showing large cash deposits made to Morrison & Associates during the same time periods. The amounts were staggering. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash deposits, far more than what I'd expect from accounting fees. I don't understand. What does this have to do with accounting services? Detective Chen leaned forward slightly. That's what we're trying to figure out. These cash deposits don't correspond to any invoiced services. And interestingly, they often coincide with significant reductions in the reported income of these same clients. My stomach dropped as the implication became clear. You think my father was helping clients hide income? We think Morrison & Associates may have been operating as more than just an accounting firm. We believe they were providing what's called income laundering services, essentially helping wealthy clients underreport their income to avoid paying taxes. I stared at the documents, my mind racing. Those summer internships suddenly took on a different meaning. I remembered my father working late nights, hushed phone conversations, clients who came in through the back entrance. There's something else, Detective Chen continued. We've identified a pattern where many of these clients were also involved in real estate transactions that appear to have been undervalued for tax purposes. Do you know anything about your family's connections to the real estate industry? My parents have friends who work in real estate, but I don't know about business connections. What about Morrison Family Trust? The name hit me like a physical blow. That's my family's trust fund, the one that paid for my college, Marcus's college? Detective Chen nodded grimly. Morrison Family Trust has been receiving regular payments from several of the shell companies we're investigating. Companies that, on paper, don't appear to provide any legitimate services.
The room felt like it was spinning. My family's money, the comfortable lifestyle I'd grown up with, my college education, the house in Westchester, all of it potentially funded by illegal activities. How long has this been going on? I asked quietly. Based on the records we've obtained, at least 15 years, possibly longer. 15 years? That covered my entire high school and college career, the period when my family's wealth had seemed to grow exponentially, when they'd become more obsessed with status and appearances. Mrs. Torres, I need to ask you directly. Did you ever see or hear anything during your time at the firm that seemed unusual? Any conversations about cash transactions? Any instructions to keep certain activities confidential? I closed my eyes, forcing myself to remember. Those summer days filing paperwork, answering phones, organizing client files. And then it came back to me. There was a room, I said slowly. My father called it the Special Projects Office. I was never allowed to file anything in there. He said it was for sensitive client matters that required extra confidentiality. Detective Chen weighed a note. Did you ever see who went into that room? A few times. Always well-dressed men, usually during lunch hours when most of the staff was gone. My father would walk them in personally and close the door. Sometimes these meetings would last for hours. Did you recognize any of these men? I thought harder, trying to place faces from years ago. One of them looked familiar. I think he might have been at some of my parents' social events, but I never knew his name. Detective Chen showed me a photograph. Is this the man? I looked at the image and felt my heart sink. It was Richard Whitmore, a man I'd known since childhood. He'd been a regular at my parents' dinner parties, a family friend who'd given me expensive graduation gifts, and had always been welcomed into our inner circle. Yes, that's him, Richard Whitmore. I've known him my whole life. Mr. Whitmore is one of the primary targets of our investigation. We believe he was running a tax evasion scheme that involved multiple shell companies and fraudulent real estate transactions. Your father's firm appears to have been essential to making these transactions appear legitimate. The weight of what I was learning pressed down on me. My family's entire lifestyle was built on criminal activity. The same parents who had rejected David because his family wasn't wealthy enough had earned their own wealth through fraud. What happens now? I asked. We're building a case. We'll need to interview other family members, examine more records, your father, your brother Marcus, your mother, if she was involved in any business decisions. My mother doesn't work at the firm. No, but we've discovered that several properties are registered under her name, properties that were purchased with funds that appear to have come from these suspicious transactions. Even my mother was implicated. The woman who had lectured me about family standards and appropriate marriages had been living off stolen money. Mrs. Torres, there's one more thing. We understand that you've been estranged from your family for some time. Is there any particular reason for that? I almost laughed at the question. They disapproved of my husband. They thought I was marrying beneath our family standards. Detective Chen's expression shifted slightly, becoming almost sympathetic. I see. That must have been difficult. They boycotted our wedding, told me I was embarrassing the family name. And you haven't had contact with them since? None. They made it clear that I wasn't welcome unless I ended my marriage. Detective Chen closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. Mrs. Torres, I want you to understand that this investigation is going to become public. When we make arrests, when this goes to trial, it's going to be front-page news in the local papers. Your family's name is going to be associated with some very serious criminal charges. The irony was almost overwhelming. My family had been so concerned about their reputation, so worried about what people would think if I married a public school teacher. And all along, they'd been building that precious reputation on a foundation of lies and stolen money. What do you need from me? I asked. Right now, just your cooperation, if we need to ask more questions. And Mrs. Torres, you might want to prepare yourself. When this breaks, there's going to be a lot of media attention. Your family is well known in Westchester County. I left the DA's office feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about the source of their wealth and status, had been turned upside down. The parents who had deemed David unworthy of joining our family had built their entire lives on criminal activity. That evening, I sat with David on our couch and told him everything. He listened without interruption, his expression growing more grim as I revealed each detail. So the people who thought I wasn't good enough because my father fixes cars, he said finally, were stealing money the whole time? It looks that way. David shook his head. How does this make you feel? About your family, I mean. I thought about it for a long moment.
angry, betrayed, and honestly, a little vindicated. They acted like they were so much better than us, like their money made them morally superior. But it was all a lie. What happens now? Now we wait, and we prepare for everything to fall apart for them. I had no idea how spectacularly it would all unravel, or how desperately they would come crawling back to me when they realized what they were facing. But for the first time since our wedding, I felt like I held the power in my relationship with my family, and I wasn't sure I wanted to use it to help them. 2 weeks after my meeting with Detective Chen, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to document every single thing I could remember about my family's business practices, every suspicious detail from those college summers, every conversation I'd overheard. Not for revenge, but for justice. David found me that Saturday morning at our kitchen table with 3 yellow legal pads spread out in front of me, writing furiously. I'd been up since 5 a.m., my mind churning through memories I'd buried for years. "What's all this?" he asked, setting down a cup of coffee beside me. "Insurance," I said, without looking up. "I'm writing down everything I can remember about working at my father's firm. Names, dates, weird conversations, unusual procedures, everything." David sat down across from me and picked up one of the filled pages. His eyebrows rose as he read my detailed timeline of cash transactions I'd witnessed, descriptions of the mysterious clients who'd visited the special projects office, and notes about documents I'd been told never to copy or file.
This is incredibly detailed, Jen. You have a really good memory. Law school trained me to pay attention to details. I just never thought those details would matter. I set down my pen and rubbed my tired eyes. David, there's something else. I think I know where some of the evidence might be. What do you mean? I turned to a fresh page on my legal pad. When I was working there the summer before my senior year, I accidentally walked in on my father shredding documents, boxes and boxes of papers. He was furious and told me to forget what I'd seen, that it was just old client files being disposed of properly. But you don't think that's what it was? Not anymore. The timing was weird. It was right after the IRS had announced they were increasing audits of high net worth individuals, and my father made me sign a confidentiality agreement about everything I'd seen that summer, which I thought was standard, but now seems suspicious. David leaned forward. Do you think there might be copies somewhere? Maybe. My father was paranoid about having backup documentation for everything. He had a safe in his home office and another one at the firm. Plus, he was old school about keeping physical records even when everything was going digital. I spent the next hour telling David about the filing system at Morrison & Associates, the way certain clients had special colored folders that were stored separately from the regular files, the fact that my father personally handled all the copying for those accounts. "You need to tell Detective Chen about this," David said. "I will, but first I want to make sure I've remembered everything correctly. I don't want to waste their time with half-formed memories." What I didn't tell David was that I was also preparing for what I knew was coming. My family was going to need help when this investigation became public, and they were going to come to me. After 18 months of complete silence, they were going to remember I existed the moment they needed something from me. I wanted to be ready. The next week, I called my old supervisor from the law firm where I'd worked before joining Hartwell & Associates. Janet Walsh had moved to the district attorney's office 2 years earlier and now worked in their white-collar crime division. "Jennifer, how nice to hear from you. How's married life treating you?" "Really well, thank you. Janet, I'm calling because I might have information relevant to a case you're working on, the Morrison & Associates investigation." There was a pause. "Are you represented by counsel in this matter?" "No, I'm not a target. Detective Chen interviewed me as a potential witness, but I've remembered some additional details that might be helpful. Can you come in this afternoon?" 3 hours later, I was back in the DA's office, this time with Janet and Detective Chen both present. I laid out my legal pads with their detailed timelines and descriptions. "This is remarkably thorough," Janet said, flipping through my notes. "You've documented things here that corroborate several theories we've been developing." "The shredding incident you described," Detective Chen added, "that time frame matches exactly with when we believe Morrison & Associates started covering their tracks more carefully. We've noticed a sharp decline in documented transactions after that period. Jennifer, Janet said carefully, I have to ask, are you doing this because you want to help our investigation or because you're angry with your family? It was a fair question. I thought about it for a moment before answering. Both, honestly, but mostly because what they did was wrong. They stole money, they cheated the system, and they acted like they were better than everyone else while doing it. People deserve to know the truth. Detective Chen leaned forward. There's something else we need to discuss. We're planning to execute search warrants next week. Your father's office, your parents' home, your brother's apartment. When we do that, this investigation is going to become very public very quickly. I understand. Your family is going to realize that someone provided us with detailed information about their operations. They're going to want to know who. I met her gaze steadily. Let me worry about that. But I was already worrying about it and planning for it. That weekend, David and I took a trip to the Apple Store. I bought a new iPhone and set up a separate phone number through a Google Voice account. I also opened a new email address that had nothing to do with my real name. What's all this for? David asked as I programmed the new phone. When my family finally contacts me, I want to control how and when that happens. They've had my number blocked for almost 2 years. If they want to reach me now, they can leave messages on the new line, and I'll decide if and when to respond. I also did something else that weekend. I drove to Westchester County and parked across the street from my parents' house. It looked exactly the same as always. Perfectly manicured lawn, expensive cars in the driveway, tasteful holiday decorations. A monument to the wealth and status my parents had built on lies. I sat there for an hour, watching my childhood home, thinking about all the dinner parties and social gatherings that had taken place there, all the conversations about appropriate marriages and family standards, and maintaining their reputation in the community. How many of their guests had known about the illegal activities? How many had been part of it? My phone buzzed. A text from David. Everything okay? You've been gone for a while. On my way home, I texted back. Just needed to see something. But what I was really doing was saying goodbye. To the life I'd grown up in, to the family I'd thought I belonged to any remaining hope that we could find our way back to each other. Monday morning brought the news I'd been expecting. Janet called me at work. The search warrants were executed this morning. Your father's office and your parents' home. We recovered boxes of documents that we believe contain evidence of the financial crimes we've been investigating. How did it go? Your father was present during the search of his office. He demanded to speak with his attorney and refused to answer any questions. Your mother was at the house when we searched there. She was upset. I could imagine. My mother, who prized her privacy and reputation above all else, having police officers go through her personal belongings, her neighbors watching from their windows. Jennifer, you should know that the local news crews were present. This is going to be front-page news in tomorrow's papers. I expected that. Are you prepared for what comes next? Once your name is mentioned as someone who provided information to investigators? I'm ready. But even as I said it, I wondered if anyone could really be ready for what was about to happen. My family's carefully constructed world was about to collapse, and they were going to learn that the daughter they'd discarded was now the one person who might be able to help them. The irony was perfect. They'd rejected me because I wasn't good enough for their standards. Now they were going to need me because those same standards had been built on crimes. That evening, David and I sat together watching the local news. The lead story showed footage of police carrying boxes out of Morrison and Associates, with a reporter explaining that the well-known Westchester County accounting firm was under investigation for tax fraud and money laundering. My father's photo appeared on screen, followed by shots of our family home with police cars in the driveway. Michael Morrison, owner of Morrison and Associates, has not responded to requests for comment. Sources close to the investigation say that evidence suggests the firm may have been involved in helping wealthy clients hide income and evade taxes for over a decade. David muted the television and looked at me. How do you feel seeing all that? Like I'm watching strangers, I said honestly.
People I thought I knew but apparently never really understood. My new phone had been sitting silent on the coffee table all evening, but I knew that wouldn't last much longer. By tomorrow, my family would realize that their golden reputation was destroyed, their wealth was built on lies, and their legal troubles were just beginning. And eventually, they'd remember that they had a daughter who worked in the legal field, who had connections to the DA's office, who might be able to help them navigate the disaster they'd created. The same daughter they'd thrown away because she'd chosen love over money. I was curious to see exactly how desperate they'd have to become before they'd swallow their pride and ask for my help. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on Thursday, 3 days after the news broke. My regular phone stayed silent, but the new Google Voice line I'd set up started buzzing on my nightstand. I let it ring. David stirred beside me. Someone's calling pretty late. Let them leave a message, I said, though my heart was racing. I'd been expecting this moment, but it was still surreal to see it actually happening. The voicemail notification appeared a few minutes later. I put in my earbuds and played it back. Jennifer, my mother's voice, tight with barely controlled panic. This is your mother. I don't know how you got this number, but I need to talk to you. Please, something terrible has happened and I don't know what to do. Call me back. I deleted the message without responding. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. 4 more voicemails on the new line, increasingly desperate. Marcus had somehow tracked down my work number and left a message with my assistant. My cousin Rachel sent a carefully worded text to my regular phone asking if I was okay and if I'd seen the news. But I wasn't ready to engage yet. I had to move first. I called Janet Walsh at the DA's office. The family has started reaching out. Multiple calls, messages at work. They're panicking. Are you planning to respond? Eventually, but I want to understand exactly what their legal situation looks like before I decide how to handle this. Jalett was quiet for a moment. Jennifer, I need to be very clear about something. You cannot and should not provide legal advice to your family members. Given your cooperation with our investigation, there would be serious ethical conflicts. I understand. I'm not planning to represent them, but I do want to know what they're facing. The charges we're preparing to file are serious. Tax evasion, money laundering, wire fraud. We're talking about potential federal charges that could carry decades in prison. The weight of that hit me. Whatever anger I felt toward my family, the thought of my father and mother in federal prison was sobering. What about Marcus? Is he implicated? His name appears on several documents, and he received payments from the shell companies. Whether he was an active participant or just a beneficiary will depend on what evidence we uncover and what cooperation we receive. Cooperation. I understood what she was really saying. The family members who helped the investigation would fare better than those who didn't. When will charges be filed? We're aiming for next week. Once that happens, your family is going to need serious legal representation immediately. After I hung up, I made another call to Harrison Blackwood, one of the best criminal defense attorneys in New York. He'd been a guest lecturer at my law school and had handled several high-profile white-collar crime cases. Jennifer Torres, I remember you from Columbia. You're calling about the Morrison case, aren't you? How did you know? Your family's situation is all over the legal community, and your name has come up as someone who provided information to investigators. Word travels fast. In cases like this, yes. What can I do for you? I want to understand what my family is facing and what their options are, hypothetically. Harrison was quiet for a moment. You can't represent them yourself, obviously. Conflict of interest aside, they need someone with federal criminal experience. Are they asking you to help them find representation? They're asking me for help, period. They haven't been specific about what kind. Well, if they were my clients, I'd tell them to surrender their passports immediately, liquidate assets to pay for legal fees, and start thinking very seriously about cooperation agreements. Cooperation agreements? If some family members cooperate with investigators and provide additional evidence, the government might be willing to recommend reduced sentences, but that window closes quickly once charges are filed. I thanked Harrison and hung up, my mind racing. My family was facing federal prison time, and their only hope for leniency was to cooperate with the same investigation I'd already been helping, the investigation that had started with my memories of those college summers. That evening, I finally listened to all the voicemails that had accumulated on the new line.
Message 2 was my father. Jennifer, I don't know where you got this number, but we need to talk. There's been a terrible misunderstanding, and I need to explain what's really happening. Message 3 was Marcus. Jen, Mom gave me this number. I know we haven't talked, but this is an emergency. The lawyers are saying things that don't make sense. You work in law, right? Can you help us understand what's going on? Message 4 was my mother again. Please, Jennifer, I know we haven't been. I know things have been difficult between us, but you're our daughter. We need you. The desperation in her voice was unmistakable. The same woman who had hung up on me when I called to share my engagement news, who had returned my wedding invitations torn in half, was now begging for my help. Message 5 was the most interesting. My father again, but this time his tone was different. Jennifer, I've been thinking about our conversation before your wedding, about the prenuptial agreement. I realize now that we may have been hasty in our judgment. Your mother and I would like to talk about how we can rebuild our relationship as a family. I played that message 3 times, amazed at the transparent manipulation. They weren't sorry for how they'd treated me. They weren't apologizing for boycotting my wedding or rejecting David. They were just sorry they needed something from me. On Saturday morning, I made my first move. I called the main line at my parents' house, knowing they'd be desperate enough to answer any call. My mother picked up on the first ring. Hello? Hi, Mom. Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. Jennifer? Oh my God, Jennifer, is that really you? It's me. Thank God you called. We've been trying to reach you for days. This whole situation is just insane. The police, the reporters, the neighbors, it's a nightmare. I heard about the investigation on the news. It's all lies, Jennifer. Someone has fed the police completely false information about your father's business. We don't understand why they're targeting us, but we think someone might be trying to frame your father. Frame him? Even now, faced with boxes of evidence and federal investigators, she was clinging to the fiction that they were innocent victims. Mom, I need to tell you something. I've been cooperating with the investigation. Dead silence. Then, what do you mean, cooperating? I mean, I've spoken with investigators about my memories of working at Dad's firm during college, about the things I observed, the procedures I witnessed. You, what? Her voice rose to a near shriek. Jennifer, how could you? How could you betray your own family like this? I told the truth about what I saw. That's not betrayal, Mom. That's accountability. You've destroyed us. Do you understand that? You've destroyed your own family. No, Mom. Dad destroyed the family when he decided to build our wealth on stolen money. I just refused to help cover it up. I could hear her crying on the other end of the line. Part of me felt guilty for causing her pain, but a larger part of me felt vindicated after months of being treated like I didn't exist. Jennifer, please, she said through her tears. You have to help us fix this. You work in law. You have connections. There has to be something you can do. There might be, I said carefully, but we need to talk in person. All of us, including David. David? Her voice turned sharp again. What does he have to do with any of this? He's my husband, Mom. He's part of any conversation about my family. Another silence. I could practically hear her internal struggle between her desperate need for my help and her lingering prejudice against David. Fine, she said finally. When can you come? Tomorrow, Sunday afternoon, 2 o'clock. Should we have our lawyer present? That's up to you, but understand that I'm not coming as your daughter asking for forgiveness. I'm coming as someone who might be able to help you navigate this situation, on my terms. After I hung up, David found me standing at our kitchen window, staring out at the street. How do you feel about seeing them? He asked.
Honestly, I feel powerful. For the first time in my relationship with my family, I'm the one with leverage. They need me more than I need them. And how do you want to use that leverage? I turn to face him. I want them to face the consequences of their actions, but I also want them to acknowledge what they did to us, to our marriage, to our relationship. I want them to admit they were wrong. David nodded slowly. And if they won't? Then they can figure out their legal problems without my help. We spent the rest of Saturday preparing for what I knew would be one of the most difficult conversations of my life. David researched federal sentencing guidelines for white-collar crimes, while I made a list of exactly what I wanted to say to my family. By Sunday morning, I was ready. Ready to face the people who had rejected me, dismissed my husband, and built their entire lives on lies. Ready to watch them squirm as they realized that the daughter they'd thrown away was now their only hope. But I wasn't ready for what I was about to discover about just how far my family's deception had gone, or how their desperation would lead them to make a mistake that would hand me the ultimate victory. Sunday afternoon arrived gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. David and I pulled into my parents' driveway at exactly 2 o'clock, and I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. The last time I'd been here was to tell them about our engagement, when they'd blindsided me with their ultimatum about David not being suitable for the family. Now I was back, but everything had changed. The perfectly manicured lawn looked the same. The expensive cars were still in the driveway, but there was a different energy to the place. Desperation had a way of changing even the most pristine exteriors. My mother opened the door before we could knock. She looked older than I remembered, with new lines around her eyes and a tension in her shoulders that hadn't been there before. She glanced nervously between David and me. "Jennifer, thank you for coming." Her voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the strain underneath. "Mom, you remember David?" She looked at my husband as if seeing him for the first time. "David, yes. Please, come in." The house looked exactly the same, but it felt different. Smaller somehow, less impressive now that I knew the true source of the money that had paid for it all. My father and Marcus were waiting in the living room. Dad looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past week, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. Marcus kept running his hands through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood.
Jennifer, my father said, standing awkwardly, I'm glad you came. Dad, I remained standing near the doorway, David beside me. I wasn't planning to get comfortable. Please, sit down, my mother said, gesturing toward the couch. We're fine standing. This isn't a social visit. The room fell silent. My family exchanged uncertain glances, clearly unsure how to proceed now that I wasn't the pleading daughter they remembered. Finally, my father cleared his throat. Jennifer, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Someone has given the authorities false information about my business practices, and we need your help to straighten this out. I almost laughed. Dad, stop. I know exactly what information they have because I gave it to them. Marcus shot up from his chair. You what? Jen, how could you do this to us? Sit down, Marcus. My voice was calm but firm, and don't interrupt me again. He sat, looking stunned. I'd never spoken to him like that before. I gave investigators a detailed account of everything I witnessed during my summers working at Morrison & Associates. The cash transactions, the special projects office, the document shredding, the suspicious client meetings. All of it. My mother's face had gone white. But why? Why would you betray your own family? Because it wasn't betrayal, Mom. It was honesty, something this family seems to have forgotten the meaning of. My father tried a different approach. Jennifer, you have to understand, the business world is complicated. Sometimes there are gray areas, situations that might look questionable to outsiders but are perfectly legitimate. Dad, I cut him off, I've seen the evidence. The shell companies, the underreported income, the fraudulent real estate transactions. This isn't gray area business practices. This is criminal activity. The room fell silent again.
I could see the reality starting to sink in, that I wasn't going to be manipulated or convinced that what they'd done was acceptable. "What do you want from us?" my mother asked quietly. "I want the truth. All of it. I want to know how long you've been doing this, how much money you've stolen, and who else was involved." "We can't tell you that," my father said quickly. "Attorney-client privilege, confidentiality agreements." "Then we're done here." I turned toward the door. "Wait!" My mother's voice was panicked. "Please don't go. We need your help." I turned back to face them. "Then start talking. Real talk, not the lies you've been telling yourselves and everyone else." My father looked at my mother, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, he spoke. "It started small, just helping a few clients minimize their tax burden through creative accounting. Everyone does it to some degree." "How long ago?" "About 12 years." "And it grew from there?" Marcus looked confused. "What grew from there? Dad, what is she talking about?" I realized Marcus genuinely didn't know the extent of what had been going on. He'd been benefiting from it, but he hadn't been an active participant. My father continued reluctantly. "Some clients wanted more aggressive strategies. We developed methods to help them shelter income through shell companies, undervalue real estate transactions for tax purposes." "And you took a percentage of what they saved?" "We charged fees for our services, yes." "Fees that were paid in cash and never properly reported as income?" My father's silence was enough. "How much money are we talking about?" I asked. "Over the years? Several $1 million." David let out a low whistle. My family's entire lifestyle, everything I'd grown up with, had been funded by stolen tax revenue. "And now you're facing federal charges that could put you in prison for decades," I said. "All three of you." "That's why we need your help," my mother said desperately. "You work in law. You have connections to the prosecutor's office. Surely there's something you can do." "There might be, but first, I want something from you." "What?" my father asked warily. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside were copies of our wedding photos, the same photos they'd never seen because they'd chosen not to attend. "I want you to look at these," I said, spreading the photos across their coffee table. "I want you to see the wedding you boycotted because you thought David wasn't good enough for this family." My mother picked up one of the photos with shaking hands. It showed David and I during our first dance, looking completely happy and in love. "I want you to see the man you rejected," I continued. "The man who has supported me through law school, who celebrates my career successes, who has never asked me for a penny of my family's money. The man who works every day to make a difference in kids' lives, while you are stealing from the government." Tears were running down my mother's face as she looked through the photos. Pictures of David's family embracing me, of our friends celebrating with us, of the joy and love that had filled our wedding day. "I want you to tell me," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion, "how a public school teacher from Queens has more integrity in his little finger than this entire family has shown in over a decade." My father was staring at a photo of David helping his elderly grandmother to his seat. "Jennifer, we were wrong about David. We can see that now." "Can you?" "Because it seems to me that you only see it now because you need something from me. Where was this revelation 18 months ago when I was begging you to give him a chance?" Marcus spoke up quietly. "Jen, we were stupid. We were prejudiced and elitist, and we hurt you badly. But you're still our family." "Am I?" "Because families don't abandon each other over career choices. Family doesn't hang up on each other for falling in love. The family doesn't return wedding invitations torn in half." I pulled out my phone and showed them the photos of the torn invitations. "Do you remember doing this, Mom? Do you remember how it felt to rip up your daughter's wedding invitation?" My mother was openly sobbing now. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We were protecting what we thought was important, but we were wrong about what actually matters." "And what actually matters?" "You do," my father said quietly. "You and your happiness. We lost sight of that."
I looked around the room at my broken family, at the people who had raised me and loved me and ultimately rejected me for making choices they couldn't understand. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to hire the best criminal defense attorney you can afford. You're going to consider cooperating with investigators if it means reduced sentences, and you're going to accept that your reputation in this community is over. And what about us? My mother asked. What about our relationship? That depends on what you do next. I might be willing to help you navigate this legal nightmare, but first, you need to do something you should have done 2 years ago. I gestured toward David, who had been standing silently beside me through this entire confrontation. You need to apologize to my husband, sincerely, for the way you treated him, for the assumptions you made about him, for the disrespect you showed him. My father looked at David, and for the first time since we'd arrived, I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. David, I owe you an apology. We judged you unfairly based on prejudices that we're ashamed of now. You make Jennifer happy in ways we never bothered to notice, and you've shown more character in this situation than we have. David nodded slowly. I appreciate that, Mr. Morrison. My mother stood up and walked over to David. I'm sorry too, for all of it, for making you feel unwelcome, for missing your wedding, for being too proud and stubborn to see what a good man you are. Thank you, Mrs. Morrison. But I wasn't finished yet. I had one more card to play, one final revelation that would complete the role reversal between my family and me. There's something else you should know, I said, picking up the wedding photos and putting them back in the envelope. Something that's going to make your legal situation much more complicated than you realize. The room went dead silent as I reached into my purse and pulled out a second envelope. This one was thicker, more official looking. My family watched nervously as I set it on the coffee table next to the wedding photos. What's that? Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. This, I said, is the reason you're in much bigger trouble than you think. I opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of documents, financial records, bank statements, property deeds, all bearing one name that made my father's face drain of color when he saw it. Morrison Family Trust, I said, the trust fund that paid for my college, Marcus's college, this house, your country club memberships, the trust that you told us was funded by Dad's successful business and wise investments. My mother's hands were shaking. Jennifer, what are you saying? I'm saying that after I started cooperating with investigators, I did some digging of my own. I hired a forensic accountant to trace the source of every deposit made into our family trust over the past 15 years. I spread the documents across the table, bank records showing large cash deposits, transfers from shell companies, payments that corresponded exactly with the dates of the fraudulent transactions at Morrison & Associates. Every penny of our family's wealth came from stolen money. The house we're sitting in right now, purchased with proceeds from tax evasion. My Ivy League education, paid for with money that should have gone to the IRS. Your membership at Westchester Country Club, funded by defrauding the government. My father sank into his chair as if his legs had given out. Where did you get these records? I got them the same way the investigators will get them, through subpoenas, court orders, and financial institutions that are required to cooperate with federal investigations. Marcus was staring at the documents in horror. Are you saying that everything, our whole lives? Everything you used to justify looking down on David and his family, everything you used to claim moral superiority, was built on crimes. While you were criticizing David's father for being just a mechanic, you were living off stolen money. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. David's family, who my parents had deemed unworthy, had earned every dollar through honest work. Meanwhile, the Morrison family fortune was entirely fraudulent. But there's more, I continued, pulling out the final set of documents. Because when investigators seize assets that were purchased with criminal proceeds, those assets get forfeited to the government. My mother's face went white. What does that mean?
It means this house, your cars, your jewelry, your art collection, everything purchased with money from the trust fund will be taken by the federal government. You're not just facing prison time, you're facing complete financial ruin. The silence that followed was deafening. My family sat there absorbing the reality that they were about to lose everything they'd spent decades accumulating. "How long have you known about this?" my father asked quietly. "I suspected it after my first meeting with investigators. I confirmed it last week when the forensic accountant finished his analysis." "And you didn't warn us?" I almost laughed. "Warn you? About what? Does stealing money have consequences? That building your life on lies eventually catches up with you?" Marcus looked up at me with desperate eyes. "Jen, you have to help us. You said you might be able to do something. Please." "I said I might be able to help you navigate this legally. I never said I could make it go away." I sat down for the first time since we'd arrived, finally ready to explain what I was willing to do. "Here's what I can offer. I have contacts in the DA's office who can connect you with the best criminal defense attorneys in the state. I can help you understand the federal sentencing guidelines and what cooperation agreements might look like. And I can provide character references for Marcus since he appears to have been a beneficiary rather than an active participant." "What about Dad and me?" my mother asked. "That depends on how much you're willing to cooperate with investigators and how much additional evidence you can provide about other people involved in these schemes." My father looked defeated. "What do you want in return?"
Nothing that you haven't already given me. Your acknowledgement that you were wrong about David, your apology for how you treated us, and your acceptance that the choices you made led to these consequences. "And our relationship?" my mother asked. "Is there any chance we can rebuild what we lost?" I looked around the room at my broken family, then at David, who had stood by me through all of this with quiet strength and dignity. Maybe, but it will be on completely different terms than before. There will be no more lectures about appropriate marriages or family standards, no more comments about David's background or his family's financial situation, and absolutely no more attempts to control my choices based on what the neighbors might think. "Because we won't have any neighbors to worry about," Marcus said bitterly. "We'll be lucky if we can afford an apartment after all this." "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," I said. "Maybe losing all the superficial trappings will help you remember what actually matters." We talked for another hour about practical matters. I gave them Harrison Blackwood's contact information and explained what they should expect in the coming weeks. Federal charges would be filed within days. Assets would be frozen and eventually seized. They needed to prepare for a very different kind of life. As David and I prepared to leave, my mother caught my arm. "Jennifer, I know we don't deserve it, but could you leave the wedding photos with us? I'd like to see what we missed." I looked at her for a long moment, then handed her the envelope. "Mom, you didn't just miss a wedding. You missed the chance to see your daughter marry a man who loves her unconditionally. You missed the chance to gain a son-in-law who would have treated you with respect and kindness despite your prejudices. You missed 18 months of our lives because you were too proud to admit you were wrong." Tears were streaming down her face. I know we lost so much." "Yes, you did. But maybe, if you can learn from this, we can build something real going forward. Something based on honesty instead of lies, on love instead of money." 6 months later, I sat in a federal courthouse watching my father and mother plead guilty to charges of tax evasion and money laundering. They had cooperated with investigators and provided evidence that led to additional arrests. In exchange, they received reduced sentences: 5 years for my father, 3 years for my mother. Marcus was sentenced to 2 years of probation and community service after testifying about his limited knowledge of the criminal activities. The family home was seized and sold at auction. My parents moved into a modest apartment in a different part of Westchester, far from their former social circle. The country club membership was gone, the expensive cars were gone, the lifestyle they'd worked so hard to maintain was completely destroyed. But something unexpected happened during those months leading up to sentencing. Without the pressure of maintaining appearances, without the constant worry about what other people thought, my family started to become real people again.
My father got a job at a small accounting firm, doing legitimate work for honest clients. My mother started volunteering at a literacy program, something she'd never had time for when her schedule was filled with charity galas and social obligations. And slowly, carefully, we began rebuilding our relationship. David and I had dinner with them once a month, simple meals in their small apartment. We talked about real things: David's students, my cases at work, books my mother was reading, projects my father was working on. They asked questions about our lives, our hopes, our plans for the future. They listened when we talked about wanting to start a family someday. They offered support instead of judgment. It wasn't the relationship I'd grown up with, but it was better. It was honest. The day before my parents reported to federal prison, we met for lunch at a small cafe near their apartment. My mother was nervous, fidgeting with her wedding ring. "I keep thinking about what you said," she told me, "about how we missed your wedding because we were too worried about what other people would think. Mom, we don't need to rehash all that again." "Yes, we do, because I need you to know that the biggest regret I have isn't losing the house or the money or the social status. I missed the chance to watch my daughter marry the man she loves. It's missing the chance to welcome David into our family from the beginning." She reached across the table and took both my hands in hers. "I can't get those moments back, but if you'll let me, I'd like to try to make new ones." 2 years later, when David and I renewed our vows on our third anniversary, both my parents were there. They had been released early for good behavior and cooperation. My mother helped me get ready, and my father walked me down the aisle to where David was waiting. It wasn't the wedding I'd originally planned, but it was better. It was real. It was a celebration of love instead of status, of family instead of appearance, of truth instead of lies. And when my mother asked if she could have copies of the photos afterward, I didn't hesitate to say yes. Because this time, they weren't asking for memories. They were asking to be part of our future. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.